I have this dissonance, intellectual dissonance. On the one hand, I, as a citizen of this country, I feel that how people are disappointed and are unhappy, and how they blame the government for all this. But you have to say that after 27 years, you've been complaining about the government, and I think it's our tradition, but not also only ours. On the other hand, yes, its unhappiness is connected with that we compare ourselves with other Western European nations. And we feel that we are developing worse. We are transforming worse than they did. And this calls for a feeling which you're unhappy with yourself. On the other, that's the one side of the coin. On the other hand, I firmly believe that we are not worse than those countries. We are just different. And the way that we're developing is there's objective circumstances for this. And if only we were to consider these objective circumstances, then I would evaluate our development as very good. All depends on what you look at circumstances as being. Additionally, this feeling is our complex of inferiority complex. And this feeling, this inferiority complex, is supported by our friends, our donors, our advisors. All the time they're telling us that all we have to do is behave like Poles do or Estonians do, and everything will be okay. And I dare to say, in principle, this is impossible. No matter how good the president we had, and right now, I just want to take 5 minutes to explain why I think so. First, and most importantly, our differentiation from these countries, which doesn't give us the possibility to behave like those countries do, is our principal difference of our values and motives of our behavior, reasons. If East European countries, for all the Soviet bloc nations, were to return back to Europe and were to come back in such a way, it's rough. And you can debate about each phrase I'm about to use. I don't have enough time to expand. But they came back not just to Europe. They came back to their own system of European values. Then we, having a system of values, not just different from them, from the European system, but the opposite. What does it mean being directly opposite in system of values? If European system, conditionally speaking, is a system of development, of personality, then Ukrainian system of values is a system of survival. I try to formulate for you shocking formulation of the system of survival. But in the tens of audiences, Ukrainian audiences, I already said what I'm about to tell you. And I did not hear any contradictions. So, 4 nouns. First, don't believe anyone except your own. And especially don't believe the government. The government, not this particular government that we have today, but government as an institution. Hide whatever you have that you've earned. If you cannot hide it, lie, cheat. If you could not lie or cheat, bribe them. This is our system of survival, with the help of which Ukrainian people, having been surrounded by three huge nations, which are far more powerful than Ukraine itself, that's how Ukraine was able to preserve itself. It survived, the Ukrainian nation survived. Survived through bloody 20th century. You probably know that this place was called the bloodiest place in the world in World War II. It remained as a socium for 10 years after 1990, when the government completely, realistically fell apart. The business community, the management system of Ukraine, the Ukrainian people have created a grandiose system of shadow economy, a tremendous system of shadow economy, which saved us. There are many deficiencies. One of the main deficiencies is that we all have lost respect to the norms and standards of the law. Then, if you remember a long time ago, it was funny to effectuate, to carry out, to adhere to the law. And that is precisely why, that's what made the sociologists in Ukraine, as a result of doing their research, to call Ukrainian majority a moral majority. In this condition, we had to build our our homegrown capitalism. The capitalism that we have built, that we have. Who built it? We didn't have revolutionaries, bourgeoisie, who were interested in effective creation of the new capitalism. The creators of this capitalism, builders, was Soviet bureaucracy, plus the aventurists, the carpetbaggers that descended down upon this chaos. And that is how our capitalism was built. And you have to remember all this. That is, whichever of you is older. Hundreds of thousands of people, and I want to underscore that that's not 20 or 30 oligarch. Oligarch is not 20 or 30 of the richest people in Ukraine. It's hundreds of thousands of people. Each one of them made a little monopoly for themselves, and that does everything possible in their power to make sure that this monopoly is not undermined. And he receives rent in connection with his ownership of that monopoly. And this could be the deputy head of a department which sells drugs or medicine which he's supposed to give away for free. And if you want to know that majority of the scandals of the current reforms in the health sector is connected with these particular types of people. This could also be something more vulgar. For example, director of a cemetery, and he sells the most expensive pieces of the cemetery, and this is hundreds of thousands of people who are engaged in this type of an activity. This is all that our capitalism represents. That's all our capitalism is. This is very easily adaptable, malleable system. This is a very strong, sustainable, durable system that we all are participating in, whether willfully or unwillingly, because otherwise we would not be able to defend our rights. And that is why the system is so stable. The big sin of this system, and you could say it's the smallest sin, is the exportation of money, is outflow of money from it. It's the smallest sin. This system has three much more important sins which make it much more stable. First of all, it's built as a monopoly. In other words, hundreds of thousands of people are resisting any reforms. And that is why we are poor. Second of all, complete Soviet bureaucracy, where there was a lot of professionals in it, even though they might not completely understand and function in the new conditions. They were replaced by their own. In other words, the people who were ready to take bribes. And third, and perhaps most frightening of all, is that the entire system, the norm system, laws, formal and informal, was adapted to the corrupted system of life. This is the social fabric where we live, and the fabric that we have to change. If you compare what I described, the situation with Estonia, with Czech Republic, or in Poland, you will have some similarities. But similarities doesn't mean identical situations. Our goal is incomparably more difficult. How in connection with this fiber? Also in connection with our customs, behavior. This way, the third factor, which is extraordinarily harmful, is the weakness of our revolutionary class. Yes, we have such a class. We have such a level of people, layer, and they've shown themselves on the Maidan as people with other type of social behavior. There's not many of them, but in contrast to other bourgeois revolutions, they did not create for ideology which was acceptable to the population, society. They did not create powerful political project. They did not carry forward the day. This is the reality. And in the process of excesses of the revolutionary Maidan, they transferred their power, and nobody took it away from them. They gave the power to the old guard, old politicians. Yes, they see future, far into the future. Yes, they're more able. It's all true. But these people have old connections, old customs, old habits, all abilities to compromise easily, old technology of management of the country. We couldn't find other people. The people in these difficult conditions created what I call for myself sandwich system of management. This means in the center of the power is the old power. Above, donors, foreign donors keep pushing from above. From below, there's pressure, volunteers, people of new generation. And this system doesn't work as badly as you might think, or as population might think. When you talk about that something is bad, sorry, but I'm a professional statistician. So I never will affirm that something is bad or good until I will see what is it compared to. You compare it to something. If I compare what is changed in the system in comparison with Sweden, I will say nothing has changed. Nothing, zero. But if I compare with that bottom that we have lifted ourselves from, then the changes are quite impressive. How, in context of macroeconomics, where have you ever seen that the fighting, country at war, even had small growth? Where have you seen that? Anywhere. Where have you seen that 2 million refugees, people who had to leave, exiles, were displaced, were placed somewhere else in the country, and there was no social tensions? Where have you seen financial stabilization occurring during the times of war? Where have you seen new institutions being formed? And I have to tell you that when you have new institutions against the background of the values which are contradicting, counterbalancing these tendencies. Do you know the difference in Poland and Ukraine, for example? In Poland, there's new institutions, they correspond to the values of the Polish population. That's why you can't compare heroism of Leszek Balcerowicz with the heroism of Balcerowicz created institutions which were corresponding to the values of the Polish people. We have to implement institutions which do not correspond to the values of the general population. And still, we're creating them. So I think that if you believe what I'm telling you, then I think that our success, from the viewpoint of where we began from, and not in comparison to Sweden, our success are quite impressive. And I'm saying not only about the amount, but I'm talking about people. Yes, the revolutionary class could not push through people who were energetic. We got what we got. For me, the principle it's important for me that not only those people who sit here believe in this, but also people were to consciously, simple people, regular folks, were to consciously understand that they are not worse than others. Our goals, our aims are more complicated, and we resolve these aims fairly successfully. And so far, that's enough. Okay?